My name is Mark, a recording angel. I've been observing this earth since the dawn of creation. The Most High has asked me to share my recordings with you. The following are my records of the church's early years and earliest believers, not just adults, but children too, collected in this book, Champions of the King, the Story of the Apostles. If today's recording contains situations which might be uncomfortable for younger listeners, I will mark the video with the words parental guidance recommended. Portia, Caesarea. I was delighted to discover that my next assignment in Caesarea was the daughter of one of my previous charges, Antonia. She had been married to the centurion Cornelius during the time that she was a special favorite of Portia, wife of Pilate, governor of Judea. And while it was usually unheard of for a Roman soldier to marry, Cornelius had been approaching the end of his term of service, and was a special favorite because he was a good man, trusted both by the people he served and by those he governed. His men under him were all loyal Romans. They were the elite guard of the Roman cohort, and respected and looked up to. Cornelius and Antonia had a modest home by Roman standards in Caesarea, with servants and a headstrong young daughter who was to be my charge. As I approached my new assignment, I rapidly reviewed her life experiences. She had the strength and tenacity of her mother, and the leadership qualities of her father, all bundled into one energetic adolescent. I smiled as I looked at her great potential. At the time, her parents were sitting in the courtyard under an awning to shade them from the afternoon sun. "I'm really worried about Portia," Antonia said to her husband. Cornelius sighed. "She certainly has a spirit, doesn't she?" "Spirit is fine. I had spirit. It's just that she's uncontrollable." He laughed. "And you weren't." She sighed. "I'm sure part of it is just a problem of whom she associates with. After all, she has no brothers and sisters." As soon as she said it, she stared dejectedly at her feet. Cornelius put his arm around her. "She may steal," he said. "I know," his wife replied sadly, "but she spends all her time gossiping with the servants and any traders that come into town. You would think that she wants to rule the world the way she collects news and gossip from everyone. I thought most young girls like to go to the market to see the soaps and the jewels and the things brought from the East and from Rome, and to find out what the fashions are elsewhere. Not our daughter. She wants to talk to the traders. She asks all kinds of questions and would never buy a thing if I wasn't along to pick out one or two things to save us from total embarrassment. It's not proper." "What would you have her do?" Cornelius asked. "Jewish families would never consider her as an appropriate friend of their daughters, so that leaves the local Gentiles. And none of them are aristocrats. They're not going to teach her proper Roman manners. You're going to have to do that." "I don't even know them all," Antonia protested. "I've spent most of my life here in Judea too, being Roman, but not knowing Roman culture very well, and definitely not being Jewish either." Her husband shook his head. "Well, at least we associate with some Romans because of my job position. Caesarea at least has a large Gentile population. However, since most soldiers don't marry, the Roman young people Antonia's age are just the offspring of soldiers and their concubines. And she's not going to learn the culture you want from them. Sometimes I think she's better off talking to the merchants in the market." Antonia sighed. "We will pray about it, Cornelius." "Surely, if the God of heaven cared enough to take care of you in your unusual upbringing and bringing you to me, he can take care of Portia too." She shrugged. "Perhaps the God of heaven is more patient than I am." "Or else is not as finicky." He laughed. "Or maybe," he suggested, "the God of heaven hasn't finished with our daughter yet." His wife smiled. "I suppose. I used to believe so strongly in him. And I used to believe that the Yeshua crucified at that Passover was his son, but that was so long, and now I don't know what I believe. I keep asking him for more children." "At least he gave us a Portia," Cornelius pointed out. "Yes," she agreed. "He did give us Portia." Antonia stood and walked back into the house. Once she left, Cornelius's shoulders sagged. He was a tough Roman centurion, but he loved his wife, and it broke his heart to see her feeling sad. He too had prayed for more children, but he didn't know what more he could do at this point. Finally, he headed for the stables. It was a likely place to find Portia. "Portia," he called out, "are you in here?"
"Father, I'm down at this end. Come see this foal."
His long stride quickly brought him to where his daughter was.
"Isn't she beautiful?"
Cornelius nodded. "She is."
"And look, she likes me."
Her father laughed. "Most horses like you if you pet and fuss over them the way you do. I think every horse in this stable likes you, but you must not come here without a servant with you. It's not safe."
"But father," she protested, "everybody knows that I'm your daughter. Nobody's going to touch me, because they're all scared of you. You're in charge here."
"There are 6 centurions here in Caesarea, and other more important people. You seem to think that I'm emperor of the entire universe, even though I keep trying to tell you that my powers don't stretch quite that far." Portia flung her arms around him.
"Well, you're king of my world."
Cornelius tried to keep his face impassive and stare straight ahead, but he couldn't prevent the smile playing around the corners of his mouth. Who could resist such adoration? He scooped her up in his arms and hugged her. "And you and your mother are the center of my world," he replied, "but you still can't come out here without a servant with you. You're going to have to stay home for a week if I catch you running off alone again. Do you understand me?"
"Then put me down. Don't hug me and threaten me at the same time."
Cornelius set her back on the ground. "It's because I love you," he said. "There's no one else in the world that I threaten and hug at the same time." As he stood with his hands on his hips, he suddenly looked very tall to Portia.
"I'll try to remember, father, but it's not my fault if the servants are so slow that they can't just keep up with me in the marketplace."
"Yes, it is, Portia. You will stay with our servant when outside the family quarters, and you will apologize for worrying your mother to death."
"I didn't mean to scare mother. She should know that I'm fine."
Yes, yes, I know you're the daughter of Cornelius," he echoed. "Now let's get you back home." He tried to shorten his stride so that his daughter could keep up with him as they headed back to the house. "So, did you talk to anyone interesting today?" he asked.
"Oh, yes. There was a merchant who had come through Lydda at last. He says that Peter, the Christian fisherman, was there. Peter was one of the 12, you know, of that group."
"Yes, I'm aware of who that particular Peter the fisherman is."
"Well," she continued importantly, "he was in Lydda a few days ago, and there was a man named Aeneas who was really sick. Everybody thought he was going to die. Peter came in and laid his hands on him and told him to get up and be better. Probably in the name of Jesus, because that's what he does in all the stories about him."
"Yes, I've heard some of them."
"Well, anyway, the man named Aeneas got up. It must be a true story, because the merchant who came through said he was there when it happened. So it's not something that somebody who knew somebody else told him. He really saw it."
"Interesting," her father said.
"Well, do you believe it?"
"I don't know. Perhaps. There are a lot of wild stories floating around, but every once in a while you encounter a few true ones."
"I've heard a lot of stories about this Peter. People bring their sick family members to him, and if his shadow touches them, they get better. And some of them take handkerchiefs for him to touch, and then they go home with them to their sick family members, and they are healed."
Cornelius laughed. "Yes, the marketplace is always full of tales, but there are still lots of sick people in this country."
"Maybe Peter hasn't gotten around to all of them yet. Or perhaps he heals only the ones that actually believe."
"That could be," her father said after thinking about it for a moment.
"Wouldn't it be fun to check him out?"
"No," Cornelius said, "and besides, Roman centurions don't do anything for fun, remember."
"Sure you do. When you're with me, it's fun, isn't it?"
He smiled at her. "Yes, it is, but we're not going to Lydda to try to find this Peter person. We're going to stay right here in Caesarea, except that I will go wherever my cohort gets sent, and you will stay home and not go adventuring even outside the family courtyard without a servant anymore, remember." Portia hung her head. Only days later, She was bursting with news again.
Mother, father, do you know what that Peter has done now?
Antonia rolled her eyes.
There's no telling.
Portia laughed.
It's even better than the Antonia story, and I even took a servant with me when I went to the market today.
Yes, you did. That was good, her father said. So, what did you hear?
Well, rumor has it that Peter is in Joppa now, and there was this woman named Dorcas there. I guess she was pretty wealthy. She took care of a lot of the other widows and children of the widows. She made them all clothes and helped them with food and things like that.
Yes, there are some very kind wealthy widows out there, her mother commented.
Well, she was one, Portia continued, and she got really sick and died, and the people were so sad, and they dragged her upstairs to the little room up on the roof, and the women had all bathed her and gotten ready to bury her.
Yes, that's their custom here, Antonia observed. Remember, the Jews bury somebody the same day that person dies.
Well, they sent for Peter because he wasn't too far away from Joppa at the time.
What did Peter do? Her mother asked. Finish up the sewing that she hadn't quite gotten done, or just miraculously feed all the widows by multiplying the leftover bread in the kitchen?
Oh, Mother, don't be so sarcastic. He did something far better than that. He raised her back to life, and she came back downstairs and resumed what she was doing. The man in the market says that she looks just the way she did before, and just as healthy as can be. Doesn't even act tired.
Antonia shook her head. They're just stories. I wish you wouldn't gossip with people like that.
Mother, the girl protested, what if it's true?
I don't believe it. Peter was a follower of Yeshua of Nazareth, and I wasn't very impressed with him. Cornelius nudged his wife gently. It's been 10 or 12 years since then, he pointed out. Maybe the man has changed. His wife raised an eyebrow. He cursed like every other fisherman back then, she said. He's not anyone I would want to have around Portia. Sophia, one of their servants, nodded as she set down a bowl of fruit on the table near the family.
Yes, she said, I was in the courtyard when he was trying to convince us that he didn't know Yeshua of Nazareth. Such words. He would have made a good Roman sailor.
The woman had come to be Antonia's personal servant as a gift from Pilate's wife when the girl married Cornelius. It gave her a friend to talk to, though they rarely discussed the events of that horrifying Passover.
Well, Portia decided, I think that we should go check him out and find out if he's for real or not.
Sophia laughed.
He won't talk to you anyway, Lady Portia. Gilgal the butcher says that Peter often said that he hates swine's flesh, onions, and Gentiles.
Portia wrinkled up her nose.
Well, I don't like onions either, she said, so this Peter person can't be all bad.
It may be, Cornelius said slowly, that Peter has changed his view on Gentiles. The latest intelligence update we had told us that the Christian groups are spreading. The biggest group of them right now is in Antioch in Syria, and I'm sure they're not all Jews there. We've also heard that Philip, one of the 12, has been baptizing Gentiles, and some Pharisee, or he used to be one anyway, named Saul has also been baptizing Gentiles. So Peter may need to alter his views.
Or maybe he already has, Portia suggested. You know, people sometimes do change.
Antonia shook her head. I don't know. He didn't seem like a very loyal follower to me. And I haven't seen anything of him since, and these stories are way too far-fetched to be true. Though if they were, it sounds as if he's not all bad. She ended the conversation by standing to her feet and walking back into the kitchen with Sophia.
Father, Portia said, if we can't go see Peter, what if you invited him here?
Cornelius smiled. I could do that, but I don't think he would come.
Why not? You're a centurion. He has to do what you say. I'm hardly going to force him to be a guest in my house. I have found that if you are going to be successful in life, it's best to compel people to do only what you feel they must do, and not use your power for personal curiosity. Well, couldn't we at least invite him? She persisted. He can only say no. Besides, he might not be that strict of a Jew any more. After all, he's staying at the house of Simon the tanner, and you know how some Jews feel about tanners.
Her father's mouth dropped open.
How did you know where he was staying? Oh, I hear things, although I don't know why anybody who used to be a fisherman would care about the way a tannery smells. I think fishermen smell bad too.
Cornelius laughed. I'd have to agree with you there.
So, do you think you might invite him?
After looking at his daughter for a long time, he said,
I will send 2 servants. Well, I will not command him to come. I will invite him as a guest. If he refuses, you must not be disappointed. No one can understand these people. If he refuses to come, I promise not to be disappointed. Out loud.
Well, I guess that's the best you can do, her father said with a laugh. Then as he walked away, he mumbled, I am going to be in such a trouble with your mother. The next few days seemed to drag for Portia. Remember, that Joppa is an overnight trip, and my servants will probably have to stay overnight on the way back too, Cornelius reminded her at one point. Don't be impatient. I wondered how the Mighty One was going to handle this stubborn apostle of his. The last time I had had contact with Peter, and from what I had heard from other angels, he was pretty unhappy about the growing influence of Gentiles among the believers. He felt they should be in a separate class from Jewish believers, and he had a real problem imagining any of them in a leadership role. I smiled. Yeshua had handled Peter many times before, and I knew that he and his father would come up with something. I couldn't wait to see what.
This broadcast has come from the book Champions of the King by Sally Pierson Dillon, with permission from the Review and Herald Publishing Association. This book and the rest of the series, War of the Ages, can be purchased by going to www.adventistbookcenter.com or by calling 1-800-765-6955. I'm your narrator, Austin Backus, and this audio project is a gift to you from my free Christian book ministry, RXF 1888. Please visit our website, www.rxf1888.com, to request free Christian books for both kids and adults. And join us here again for more stories from Mark the Recording Angel.